everybody, episode 644. We're the podcast that is Week America, the Tour Sports Podcast presented by Betfred Sportsbook. It is Wednesday, December 28th, 2022. People, I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody had a great holiday weekend. Hope you got to relax, spend time with loved ones. Hope Santa brought you everything that you asked for. And I hope everybody's ready for a fun midweek episode of the Aaron Torres Pod. Here's what you need to know. College football playoff is coming this weekend. The plan today, though, is to focus on basketball. Friday will be a mostly college football show. We'll preview the playoff. We will preview the other bowl games, the Orange Bowl, Sugar Bowl, all that good stuff. Today, though, I want to focus on college hoops because, one, we have a loaded slate tonight. Kentucky, Missouri, UConn, Villanova, Arkansas, LSU, Mississippi State, Alabama, on and on and on and on and on. But what's more important than just the games tonight, we are officially at this point in go time of conference play. Now, we still have a out-of-conference game here or there, but everybody's basically in conference play. It's starting up, and what I want to do is kind of a mid-season recap of everything that you may have missed so far. Who is the best team in college basketball? Who are the favorites? Who are the teams that are struggling? What about the Blue Bloods? Why do they stink? What about the SEC, which is fascinating with schools like Missouri, LSU, not Florida, they stink. LSU, Mississippi State, Missouri playing well. So with that said, college hoops heavy today. We will wrap the show also with a fun interview. Steve Rivera has covered the Arizona Wildcats forever. And if you're a college hoops junkie, especially one of a certain age, you remember Lute Olson as maybe one of the great underrated coaches in the history of college basketball. Well, Steve Rivera, who covered Lute Olson for decades, has a new book out now about Lute Olson, which we will talk about. So Steve Rivera coming up. On top of that, a mid-season recap of all things college hoops. It should be a fun one. Before we get started, I want to welcome back our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. By now, I have told you their whole story, and I love their story. Started in 1967 in the UK, over 1,600 shops in the UK, and they have come to the United States and made a huge splash. They are the presenting sponsor, not only of Aaron Torres Media, but also the Denver Broncos, the Colorado Rockies, the Cincinnati Bengals, and that is why I'm talking to you about the Bengals specifically today. It is because January 1, this coming Sunday, legal sports betting in the state of Ohio. Betfred is throwing a launch party of the century, okay? January 1, Foaling Warehouse in Cincinnati. Betfred is throwing a crazy launch party. Anthony Munoz is going to be there. Other special guests. They're going to give away dozens of tickets to the Monday night game, Bills, Bengals, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, potential AFC Championship game preview. And as of right now, the thing is, your boy is intended to be there. Now, we'll see what happens with all this crazy Southwest stuff. But the plan is I will be there. But more importantly, Betfred, I've told you, nobody takes care of their customers like Betfred, and you will see it. If you live in northern Kentucky or the Cincinnati area, all you got to do, click on the link in the show description. You're going to want to come to Foaling Warehouse January 1. Again, Anthony Munoz will be there. Other guests, I'm going to hopefully be there. 30-plus tickets to the Broncos-Bills, or the Bengals-Bills Monday night game, Allen versus Burrow. And oh, by the way, an all-day betting contest to determine who is the best bettor in the state of Ohio. Take advantage now. Click the link in the show description. You will not be disappointed. Foaling Warehouse on January 1st. With that said, let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, I will just tell you, this week right here, it is actually a genuinely fun week to be a college sports fan. Hopefully, most of you have a lot of time off or at least some time off from work. But beyond that, if you do, you got nothing but sports on TV. We basically got bowl games all day, every day, increasingly getting better. And college hoops is really about to ramp up here over the next couple days. And so what I want to do now, what I want to do on today's show, I don't think we're going to do like other we're not going to do the mega bowl preview because the bottom line is this. We know which bowl games matter. We know which ones don't. I think most of them are for entertainment purposes only. The Alamo Bowl between Washington and Texas is fascinating. I don't think we need to break it down for 15 minutes here. And so I bring it up solely because I think Friday's show will be the day that we kind of focus on bowl preview, what you need to know, the big games, obviously the 2 college football playoff games, but also the Sugar Bowl with Alabama and Kansas State, the Orange Bowl, which will be Friday night between Clemson and Tennessee, on and on and on and on and on. Today, though, I do want to focus on college basketball because I'll say this. It is really go time in college basketball right now. Now, we haven't technically reached the halfway point of the season, but kind of on the calendar, we've sort of reached about the 40 to 45% mark. Most teams play 31 regular season games. Most teams are at about 13, 14 regular season games. So we're played already, I should say. So we're not quite at, the 50% mark, but with conference play starting this week, basically everywhere. Most conferences, the Big East, the Big 10, the ACC have already started. This week, starting tonight, the SEC gives us a loaded slate. We got LSU, Arkansas. We got Auburn, Florida. We got Mississippi State hosting Alabama, both ranked teams. We also, oh, by the way, have Kentucky going to Missouri. Missouri's 11-1. So we're going to get a loaded slate tonight. Villanova at UConn, by the way, no big deal there. Loaded slate this evening. And then it's really go time in college hoops. And so what I want to do over the next few minutes is really just kind of reset college hoops here at just about the halfway point. What you need to know, who are the contenders, who are the pretenders, who's overrated, who's underrated, what conferences do you need to be worried about, all that good stuff. So let's get into it and let's start. And to me, the number one question in college hoops right now is pretty straightforward. Who's number one? And obviously coming into the season, it was North Carolina. Houston had its bite at the apple. But really, this conversation, I do think, comes down to really, most people think it's 2 teams. I would argue there is a third as well. So let's get into it. The 2 teams, obviously, that everybody thinks are in the running for number 1 or number 2, or number 1, I really should say. I think it's Purdue and UConn, okay? And so I'm not going to belittle either one, but I would say this. If I had an AP vote, I think there is one team that is definitively better than everybody else. I don't think it's particularly close. And I do think it's UConn. And I know everyone's going to say, Torres, you're a homer. Torres, you love UConn. Torres, you only say nice things about UConn, blah, blah, blah. Torres, you sell those Maura Hurley shirts that are selling off the chains, which you should get yours, by the way, AaronTorresOnline.com. Merchandise, neither here nor there. Bottom line is, I'll just say this about UConn. I do not believe that I'm being a homer by saying that I believe they are the best team in college basketball, and I don't even think it's particularly close. One, most impressive stat in the sport right now is pretty straightforward. 13-0. 13 wins by double figures. Now, all of them have been dominant. Their last game prior to Christmas break, they struggled for a large stretch against Georgetown. But the bottom line remains, this is a team that has won 13 games by double figures all 13 times that they have stepped on the court. And it's not as though they haven't played anybody either. I think that's the other part. Oh, well, who have they played? Well, Alabama's in the top 10 right now. Beat Alabama by double figures. Iowa State is a team that should be in the top 25. They currently sit at 10-2. UConn smoked them. UConn smoked a good Oregon team in Oregon. They beat Oklahoma State at home. They beat Florida on the road. They're 2-0 in Big East play. So don't tell me they haven't played anybody, and they have beaten the crap out of basically everybody. But why I like UConn, it's not just the raw 13 wins by double figures. When I watch them, and I've heard other people who cover college hoops say this, but I do think there's something to it. I don't know what their weakness is. I don't know if they have a weakness. They go about 9-10 deep, and I've said this before. This is how deep UConn is, okay? They have a transfer from Virginia Tech named Naheem Aline, who averaged just under double figures at Virginia Tech last year. Virginia Tech won the ACC tournament. Virginia Tech played in the NCAA tournament. He is probably UConn's 9th to 10th best guy on this team, and I'm not being facetious when I say that, and that is not an insult. It just shows you how deep this team is. They really go too deep at every position. And again, I don't know what their weakness is. They shoot 37% from 3, so you can't, they beat you from behind the arc. They're number 2 in the country in rebound rate. In other words, of all the rebounds that go up, they're number 2 in the country. They're number 5 nationally in assists per game. And so you look at a team, I mean, just think about what I just told you. If you take care of the ball, if you pass the ball, if you distribute the ball, if you hit open threes, and if you rebound, that's a tough team to beat. And I'll take it a step further. This stat kind of blew me away. UConn is in both the top 20 right now in scoring offense in terms of points that they score and scoring defense. So they're scoring a lot and they're holding you to a little. That is incredible because in general, when you play fast, when you score a lot, that generally means that the other team is probably going to score a lot as well as a byproduct. That is not the case at UConn. They are completely dominant. They have right now, as I record here, they have seven different players averaging at least 7 points per game. Adama Sanogo, preseason Big East Player of the Year, 18 points, 7 rebounds. Donovan Clingan, the up-and-comer, playing really well. Obviously, Andre Jackson, who I think will be a first-round pick. I had dinner with an NBA executive when I was out in Vegas a few weeks ago. He loves Andre Jackson. He said Andre Jackson would have NBA. He would be a top 5 athlete in the NBA if he stepped onto a court tomorrow, leading the team in assists. Jordan Hawkins, a guy that I have loved, 14 points, 42% three-point shooting. I'm just telling you, I think UConn's the deepest, most balanced, no flaws team in college basketball. They are number 1 in my book, but I'll also say this. I think there are 2 other teams that if you want to argue are number 1, I'm not going to fight you on. One is the team that is actually number 1 in the polls. That is the Purdue Boilermakers. And one thing that does drive me a little bit crazy about polls is the unwillingness of pollsters to move teams based on what actually happens on the court. So the reason that Purdue is number 1 over UConn, both teams are undefeated. It's because Purdue got in the poll first. They kept moving up. UConn got in after them. UConn kept moving up. And Purdue's only, I think, only number 1 because of the fact that they were in the poll first. With that being said, if you believe Purdue's number 1, I'm not going to fight you for a few reasons. One, they do have a couple really nice wins on the schedule. They beat Gonzaga on a neutral court. They beat Duke on a neutral court. Actually, in the same tournament that UConn went 3-0, Purdue won the other side of that bracket, and they beat a West Virginia team that's now ranked as well. So just out in Portland over Thanksgiving break, they beat 3 teams that are currently ranked in the top 25. Beyond that, they also beat Marquette at home too, which is a really good team, which I should mention. Beyond that, I just talked about the way that UConn rebounds the ball. I said UConn's number 2 in total rebounding rate. You know who's number 1? The Purdue Boilermakers. You know who's the mid-season National Player of the Year? It's Zach Edey, the starting center for Purdue. And so as I go through this list, if you want to say Purdue is number 1, I have no problem because they have the wins that justify it. They have a National Player of the Year candidate. They play real defense. They rebound the crap out of the ball. My only knock on them, couple close losses, unlike UConn, barely survived in overtime at Nebraska, barely survived. They beat Davidson by 8 in a game that was pretty close. But again, National Player of the Year, rebound the ball well, like UConn, pass the ball well, shoot the 3 ball well, not a lot of weaknesses when it comes to Purdue. Finally, what I would say, I think there's a third team that you can make the argument is the number 1 team in the country. And I don't know if anyone's going to do it. And I even heard their coach say that he's unhappy with some things that are going on with the team right now. I would say the Arizona Wildcats, to me, are a team that I believe you could make the argument is the best team in college basketball. Now, I don't think you can necessarily justify putting them at number 1, but I think you can make the argument they're the best team. So first of all, Tommy Lloyd, the head coach, obviously we've talked about him a lot. Came from Gonzaga, brought that style of play with him. And right now, Arizona, as I've said a few times this season, is looking more like Gonzaga than Gonzaga, averaging 90 points per game, like UConn, 37% from 3. Now, they turn the ball over a little bit more than I think Arizona fans would like, but it's partly because they play so fast. It's partly because they share the ball so well. Arizona actually number 2 in the country in assists. Ironically, you know who's number 1 in the country? It's Xavier, coached by Sean Miller, the former Arizona coach. So Xavier number 1, Arizona number 2, Arizona number 3 in the country in rebound rate. So how about that for a set? I think rebound rate is a very important stat when it comes to determining who are good teams and who maybe not good teams, but what is sustainable success? Because if you get a bunch of offensive boards and you keep the other team off the offensive glass, that is a stat that I think translates to any level, any sport, any team. You can go on the road, neutral court, whatever. So how about that? Rebound rate. Number 1 in the country is Purdue. Number 2 is UConn. Number 3 is Arizona. I didn't even know that until I started doing the homework. But what I like about Arizona is a couple things. One, score the basketball, and they can beat you in so many different ways, right? Azuolas Tubelis, I think, is maybe the one of a couple breakout players nationally. Umar Ballo might even be more impressive than him. 17 points, 9 rebounds per game. Arizona, like UConn, shoots the ball well, 37%. Courtney Ramey, I don't even think has played that well for them, and he is coming on strong, and it shows you how deep this team is. And I think the game the other night against Tennessee, and I know Tennessee fans are going to be mad, but the fact that they put up Tennessee on 75 points on Tennessee, one of the best defenses in college basketball, that speaks to me about how deep this team is, how talented this team is, and how well they can score, putting up 75 points on Tennessee. Very good sign for Tennessee that they could hang with them as well. But Arizona, to me, I think is in the mix. Also worth noting, like these other teams, great resume so far. Neutral court win against San Diego State, neutral court win against Creighton, which doesn't look great right now. We'll talk about Creighton in a minute. I do think it will hold up, though. And then beyond that, I'll take it a step further. Beat Indiana on a neutral, beat Tennessee at home. They do have one loss, unlike UConn and Purdue. But as I told you, I don't judge teams based on just wins and losses because I do think context matters, okay? Arizona's only loss came the game after they got back from the Maui Invitational. So they go to Maui, they play 3 straight games in 3 straight days. They fly out, probably 8 o'clock at night on a Thursday. They probably land, on a Wednesday. They land, and a few days later, they go on their first road trip in the Pac-12 to Utah. That was their only game they lost, was right after Maui. And you look at all the teams that played in Maui, the next game is a struggle. It was a struggle for Arkansas. Arkansas fans know that. It was a struggle for San Diego State. They had to win a game at the buzzer. It's obviously been a struggle for Creighton. So Arizona, to me, is the third team that I would consider number 1 in the country. Next group of teams, really quickly. I want to hit on the next group, then we'll talk the Blue Bloods, and then from there, we'll take a quick break. The next team, the next group. So let me even backtrack. I'm getting ahead of myself. It's Tuesday. I haven't recorded in a minute. I'm fired up. Forgive me. This is what we're going to do. We just talked about 3 teams that I think are number 1. So now, the question many of you I know are asking, you're sitting there, you're tapping your toe wondering. You're saying, Torres, well, if those are the 3 best, what's the next tier behind? And the next tier behind them has a few teams that are interesting to me. I do think that tier starts with Houston. Houston's only loss was at home to Alabama. And listen, I know we got a lot of Bama fans that listen to this show. I'm not trying to discredit the win, but never forget in that game, Houston led by 15 points at one time, and they ended up not being able to close out that game. Credit to Alabama for winning it. Nobody remembers who was up, who was down. When they look at tournament resumes later on in March, the only thing they're going to care about is who won that game. Alabama won at Houston. I thought Houston, though, had a very nice bounce back a week later, winning at Virginia. They've taken care of business against everybody else, and I do think they're in that next tier. Big road win at Oregon earlier in the year. And the one thing that Houston does better than anybody is they rebound the crap out of the ball. We've talked about it with them before, but in terms of Houston, what they do, and this is, to me, we talk about stats that are important. I just talked about rebound rate, if you remember a minute ago. Well, Houston isn't on top in rebound rate, but where Houston is really good, they are number 3 in the country, behind only Tennessee and Alabama in terms of offensive rebounds. And so the number of second chance opportunities they get just by playing harder than you, I think it keeps them in every game. And I think they have the dudes to back it up. Marcus Sasser, 16 points per game. He hasn't even been great this year. I think there's another level for him to get to. Jamal Shed, I believe, has been a breakout player. You might not notice it, but he's averaging 6 assists per game, one of the top assist guys in college basketball. Jarris Walker down low is a really talented player. This Houston team, they're not going to have an amazing resume like UConn or Arizona or whatever, but I do think they are a team that is capable of winning a national championship. I'm going to throw you a little curveball in terms of a team that I think can win the national championship. That's the UCLA Bruins. And I know what you're probably going to sit there and say, oh, UCLA, come on. Da, da, da. Did you see what they just did on the East Coast a few weeks ago against Maryland and Kentucky? They went to Maryland and destroyed a good Maryland team. And then obviously the Kentucky game, we already talked about it. It speaks for itself. Wasn't pretty, wasn't good for Kentucky. And the bottom line remains that when I look at this UCLA team, this is what I see. I see a team. So as I've covered college hoops through the years, there are a few things that you need as a college basketball program to ultimately reach your potential as a national championship contender, okay? You need NBA players. You need star, NBA caliber players, I think, are number one. You need a veteran point guard. You need to be able to shoot the ball. You need to be able to play defense, all of that good stuff. I bring it up. You need tournament experience, by the way. One, there's no team in college basketball that has more tournament experience than UCLA right now, going to a Final Four last year, or going to a Final Four 2 years ago, making the Sweet 16 last year. A good chunk of those guys are back, including their three best players. And so I look at UCLA, and what impresses me about them, I like how all the pieces fit. You have the veteran point guard, Tiger Campbell. You have Amari Bailey on the wing, who can be a point guard if you need him, but he can also handle the ball and take over, and he can also play off the ball as well. You have Jaime Jaquez, the kid who destroyed Kentucky a few weeks ago. You have Jalen Clark, who I think is the best defensive player in college basketball, 2.5 steals per game, one of the tops in that category in college basketball. David Singleton is shooting the you-know-what out of the ball. Like UConn, like Arizona, UCLA shoots 37%. So they are another team that I do believe is in the hunt for a national title. And I'll throw one more out there right now. And there's others that could emerge, right? If I don't mention your team, it doesn't mean by the end of the year they can't get there. Doesn't mean that Tennessee can't get there. Doesn't mean that even Bama, I think Bama turns the ball over a little too much for my liking. Doesn't mean they can't get there. There is one more team, though. Baylor's another one. I don't think they're there yet. I think they can get there. Virginia, I don't think they're there yet, but they can get there. The other one that I would say, I do think it's the Arkansas Razorbacks, okay? And Arkansas right now, your fans, I know what you're thinking. Torres, have you seen the injury news? Trevin Brazil, best big guy, is out for the season. Nick Smith Jr. out indefinitely with a knee injury. And so I'm not saying Arkansas will get there right now this second, but I'll say this. If you get Nick Smith back, that starting five is as good as anybody in college basketball. The thing about Arkansas, and I've said this before, they have 3 or 4 guys that can take over games in a way that, I don't know that Tennessee has one guy that can take over. I don't know that maybe Houston has Sasser, but there's some teams, I don't know if they have one guy that can take over a game. Arkansas has 3. We saw Anthony Black do it in Maui. Ricky Council, the wing from Wichita State, is their leading scorer. And Nick Smith, if he plays, obviously is capable of doing that. And so you add them in. Jalen Graham has come on over the last couple of weeks. He is, of course, the transfer from Arizona State. The Mitchell twins are playing better. I still think all of the pieces are there for Arkansas. Now, do they get there? That's another question. Can they get Nick Smith healthy? That's the important one. Keep an eye on Nick Smith. I think he is the X factor. He is the one that you need to follow. If they can get that kid healthy, I think Arkansas is a team that can win a national championship. I just want to want to take a quick break. Do want to come back, hit on the other thoughts that I have at the midseason point of college basketball. We'll hit on some disappointing blue bloods. Who should you be worried about? Who should you not be worried about? We'll talk about some conferences, specifically the SEC, the Big East, the Big 12 maybe. Take a quick break, and we will be, where will we be? You know where we'll be. We'll be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, I want to welcome back the sponsor of our Aaron Torres Pod NFL Pickup Challenge. I am, of course, talking about Bracket Fanatics. By now, you know all about Bracket Fanatics. I have been working with them for years, multiple NCAA tournaments. This year, Bracket Fanatics decided to get into the NFL space, and they are doing the Aaron Torres Pod NFL Pick'em Challenge. We are doing the Aaron Torres Pod NFL Pick'em Challenge, courtesy of Bracket Fanatics. What do you need to do? How do you need to sign up? How can you take advantage of Bracket Fanatics? Let me tell you right now. All you got to do, go to bracketfanatics.com. Click the tab, join bracket. The bracket name is Torres. And here's what happens when you sign up. All you got to do every single week, pick every single game on the NFL slate. Not against the spread, not over under. Just pick every single game. And here's what happens. Winner every single week gets $100 cash courtesy of Bracket Fanatics. So bracketfanatics.com, join bracket name Torres, pick the games. Every winner every week gets $100 cash courtesy of Bracket Fanatics. And here's the cool part. When the season ends in a few weeks, you can still get $1,000 season-long cash prize. That goes to the ultimate winner, courtesy of Bracket Fanatics. Not too late to sign up. You'll automatically be entered to win the $100 weekly winner. All you got to do, bracketfanatics.com, join bracket name Torres. Tell them Torres sent you, bracketfanatics.com. All right, everybody. I'm back. Gonna be back. I do want to switch gears. And I want to talk about some more things related to college basketball. Again, if you're a college football junkie, you don't care about college basketball, Come back for Friday's show. We're going to have plenty on the college football playoff and the other big bowl games. But at the same time, tonight, as I said, it is a marquee night in college basketball. Villanova at UConn, Mississippi State hosting Alabama, Missouri hosting Kentucky, LSU hosting Arkansas, on and on and on and on and on. And what I want to do now is keep the conversation going on what I deem to be the biggest, best, and most interesting stories through college hoops so far. In the first segment, if you somehow skipped it for some strange reason, we talked about the three teams that I believe you can make the argument are number one in the country. And then we also talked about, on top of that, that next tier behind them, UCLA, Kansas, whoever, Arkansas, I think was in that mix as well. What I want to do now is talk about some teams that I think if you had asked me a month ago, 6 months ago, after the season, who would be in that mix but are not, I want to talk about the Blue Bloods, because it's very interesting that I just did a preview on who I think are the best teams in college basketball, and that next tier, no Duke, no North Carolina, no Kentucky, no Villanova. Want to spend a few minutes talking about each. I'm calling this segment the Blue Blood Blues. Basically want to talk about these big programs, and I want to tell you how concerned I am as a consumer of college basketball about each of them. So let's start with Duke. I think Duke is kind of the most interesting one, and we've talked about them a little bit before, but they're weird, right? 10-3 record as we record here. The positive is they do have the good win-loss record, and to their credit, they actually do have a lot of really good wins. They beat Iowa on a neutral court. They beat Ohio State at home. They beat Xavier on a neutral court. So a couple really good wins, couple up in Portland, one at Madison Square Garden with Iowa in the Jimmy V Classic. But also, I think it is worth noting, and this is where I'd be a little bit concerned about Duke, two best teams on their schedule, lost to Kansas, lost to Purdue, and Portland. That's the positive. That's the negative, where they are with the wins and losses. Now, in terms of Duke themselves, I think they're very interesting for this reason. It's hard to gauge them because the two guys that I think we thought were going to be the stars of this team have really been limited. Derek Lively, number one player in America, according to some recruiting services, has been very limited and has barely played at all, as a matter of fact. Last game against Wake Forest. Now, they did lose their ACC opener at Wake Forest. I think that's worth noting as well. Lost to the two best teams on the schedule, also lost their only true road game. But on top of that, the guys that they need to be great are just not playing great right now. Derek Lively, who I thought was going to be the best freshman in college basketball, he dealt with some injuries early, missed the Wake Forest game with a non-COVID illness. Speaking of forget non-COVID illness, he's been a non-factor so far this season. Played in only 11 of 13 games, averaged 4 points and 4 rebounds per game. Now, he does have 2 blocks per game, but this is not the guy that we all thought he was going to be. On top of that, Dariq Whitehead, probably maybe the most NBA ready of all of their freshmen. He has struggled as well. He's missed time with injury. Remember, he had a foot surgery and a foot problem in the preseason, has come back, has looked good, is averaging about 7 points per game. But it's hard to gauge Duke because you can't really gauge them when the two players that you expected to be great are not great. Their two best NBA draft prospects are not playing like that right now. Now, on a positive, Kyle Filipowski, the third freshman in this group, they have 5 overall, but I think those were the big 3, Lively, Filipowski, and Dariq Whitehead. Filipowski's been awesome, averaging 14.5 points per game, 9 rebounds per game. He has shown the ability to hit threes, though not consistently. And so in terms of Duke, in terms of how concerned I am, I'm going to give you a scale of concern for all of these teams. I'll put them at about a 6, with 0 being no concern at all, but 10 being the best, or 10 being end the season right now. It's over. There's no reason to even play games. So if I'm grading Duke on a scale of 0 to 10, I do put them at about a 6, because I do think even 2-3 weeks ago, I remember talking about Duke after the trip to Portland, and I said, it's hard to get too worried about them because they really haven't had their 2 best players for most of the early part of the season. Well, now we're basically into January. We're basically into league play. And as bad as the ACC has been, there are good teams. And if Duke does not get those guys going, they're going to be in trouble. They open ACC play on this coming Saturday, December 31st against Florida State. Then they play at NC State. They have Miami, Virginia Tech, Wake Forest again, and North Carolina, all between the first week of January and the first week of February. Those are 4 or 5 NCAA tournament teams right there. Miami, I don't know if people even realize, is ranked in the top 15 right now. And so I only bring it up because of the fact that I'm not totally worried about them, but at some point you do have to get guys back and you do have to get them healthy to reach your full potential. I would put Duke at about a 6 on the concern scale, the AT concern scale, if you will. Let's keep it going. Let's go across Tobacco Road and let's go to the rivals of the Duke Blue Devils. That is the North Carolina Tar Heels. North Carolina, they were, to be blunt, to be clear, my preseason national championship pick. Coming off last year's run to the national title game, they, of course, beat Duke both in the final game of Coach K's regular season career at Cameron Indoor, and then, of course, in the final game of Coach K's career period against Duke in the Final Four. And so you look at North Carolina, they return 4 starters. They were my preseason pick to win the national championship game and to win the national championship. And they just have not looked the part so far. At one point, lost 4 games. I remember talking about them both after the PK 85 event as well as the Indiana loss. And I did say, like, bottom line, they do not look very good right now. And a lot of the concerns that we had about them at this time last year are starting to creep up again. Inefficient shot selection from Caleb Love, bad 3-point shooting, bad spacing, too many turnovers, too little ball movement. But to North Carolina's credit, I do think they're starting to figure things out. They have, after that 4-game losing streak, have won 4 in a row. That included their ACC opener against Georgia Tech, as well as a neutral court win over Ohio State in the CBS Sports Classic, and a neutral court win in theory against Michigan in North Carolina. Wasn't really a neutral court, but you kind of get the point. Most importantly for North Carolina, I think they're starting to figure out the pieces, and Armando Bacot, who was the key to their Final Four run last year, ACC Player of the Year runner-up, is starting to play like that guy. 26-5 the other night versus Michigan. Remember, Michigan has an All-American in Hunter Dickinson, and also 28-15 versus Ohio State. North Carolina, to me, of all the teams we're going to discuss, I feel the least concerned about. It's taken them a minute. I do think they're figuring it out. If I had to put the concern meter, I'd probably put it at about a 4.5. As long as they can keep Armando Bacot on the court and healthy and running things through him, I think they're going to be just fine. Let's keep it going. And you know where I'm going next. I'm going to the Big Blue, the Bluegrass, Big Blue Nation, Kentucky Wildcats. And I've talked about Kentucky a ton. Talked about John Calipari after the UCLA game a few weeks ago. I'm kind of over the give us time. I'm kind of over tweaks. I'm kind of over this. Show me something, Coach Cal. Right now, on a positive note, Kentucky is 9-3. To their credit, they have taken care of everybody that they are supposed to beat on the schedule. Problem is they don't really have any great wins. They did beat Michigan in London in a game where Michigan's starting point guard got hurt and unfortunately is out for the season. But the problem with Kentucky, and we all know what it is, look at the marquee games on their schedule. Michigan State, neutral court, lost in double overtime. At Gonzaga, even though it was sort of a neutral court, but it really wasn't, lost in Spokane. Wasn't even competitive, really, to be honest. And then, of course, a few weeks ago, they played UCLA in that CBS Sports Classic. It was ugly. Lowest point total in 10 years for this Kentucky team. And so I think at this point, you don't need me to tell you the concerns about Kentucky basketball. Do they have the pieces? Does John Calipari know how to implement the pieces? And at some point, it's go time. I'll tell you this. They play a very good Missouri team on the road tonight at Missouri. If that team does not come ready to go, they are not winning that game. I am just telling you right now. I don't know if that's my official pick. I think Kentucky's about a 1-point favorite in the Betfred Sportsbook. I'd probably lean Missouri the way Kentucky's playing right now. They got plenty of time to figure it out. But at a certain point, do they have plenty of time? Again, no real non-conference resume to speak of, and they have to start getting marquee wins. And I'll tell you this for Kentucky. They do have Louisville after Missouri, but it doesn't really get much easier from there. After the Louisville game, they will host LSU early next week. Then they travel to Alabama. They also have a trip to Tennessee early this month. Remember, Rick Barnes has largely owned John Calipari. Kentucky's got to figure it out quick. We'll see if they do. Finally, in terms of the Blue Blood Blues. Oh, by the way, Kentucky, I would put it at about a 6.5, 7 in terms of the concern scale, because I don't know if they have the pieces, and I don't know if John Calipari is going to play the pieces that he needs to. I would put that at about a 6.5 and a 7. Finally, Villanova. Villanova may be the most interesting team on this list. 7-5 overall. At one point, they had lost a bunch of games. They went 0-3 in that Portland tournament. But to their credit, they're starting to figure it out. The key piece here with Villanova, Cam Whitmore, their star freshman. He was out early. He has come back, and he has largely made them look like a different team. Overall, they're just 7-5, 7 wins, 5 losses. But they're 5-0 since Cam Whitmore came back. He is averaging 12.5 points, including a 21-point performance against Penn. They have had a couple good wins since he got back. They beat St. John's at home. They beat Oklahoma at home. And so I think Villanova's starting to figure it out. They do play a big one at UConn tonight, and the spread in that one is huge. It's about 14 points, believe it or not. UConn is favored. So we're going to find out more about Villanova. But in terms of the concern scale for Villanova, I would put it at about a 6, only because I think they figure it out. And as we'll discuss in a minute, the Big East is a little bit down, but they got to start winning games and winning games in a hurry. They did themselves no favors in the out-of-conference, although, like I said, they did, by the end of the out-of-conference, pick up a nice win against Oklahoma, but they have a couple of really bad losses on the resume. At Temple, Temple's not good. Portland and Oregon, who is not good either. So Villanova's really got to make some moves in the Big East, got to pick up some quality wins just to get into the tournament. Let's wrap it up with a couple other news and notes items from the early part of the college hoop season. I'll tell you, I think the most interesting league in college basketball is the SEC, okay? And why the SEC is so interesting is for a few reasons. One, I don't think anybody knows what to make of Kentucky. We just talked about them. There are 3 other teams that I think most people believe are at the top: Alabama, Arkansas, and Tennessee. What's fascinating about them, all 3 teams have had great moments this year. All 3 teams have concerns, and so let's get into them really quick. For Alabama, Alabama played maybe the toughest out-of-conference schedule in America. They've already played UConn on a neutral court. They have already played Michigan State on a neutral court, North Carolina on a neutral court. They have already played Gonzaga, in theory, on a neutral court. So just think about that. UConn, Gonzaga, North Carolina, and Michigan State. Oh, and then, by the way, they went to Houston when Houston was number 1 in the country, and they hosted a good Memphis team as well. That is as tough of a 6-game out-of-conference schedule as I can imagine. And to their credit, they're going into SEC play tonight with just 2 losses. That's the positive on Alabama. The negative is 2 things. One, just dealt with an injury to a key player, Namari Burnett, really good 2-way guard who I think takes pride in playing on the defensive end. How do you bounce back from that? And then 2, they do turn the ball over a lot, which is kind of surprising because they have so many guards on that team, but they do turn it over about 17 times per game. They have to get that solved if they want to keep having success. Keeping it going, other teams in the SEC, Tennessee's kind of the opposite. Alabama's great at scoring. Tennessee's one of the elite defensive teams in college basketball. Number 2 in the country in field goal percentage, defense, number 3 in the country in points allowed. The problem with Tennessee, right now, they have some brutal scoring stretches, okay? As of right now, as I record here, going into SEC play tomorrow, they actually play at Ole Miss. They really, they average about 74.5 points per game. They have 5 players in double figures, but they do go through these super long stretches where they just don't look right. Why I'm not really concerned about that. They did the same thing last year before turning it on before the NCAA tournament. I remember they played in the Jimmy V Classic last year in Madison Square Garden against Texas Tech. It was one of the worst offensive games that I have ever seen. And at the same time, they ended up figuring it out by the end. Tennessee offense is the problem. Alabama turnovers are the problem. And then finally, a team that I actually think might be the best team in the SEC, if they can stay healthy, is the Arkansas Razorbacks. I just don't know if they can stay healthy. Arkansas, to its credit, has a very nice out-of-conference resume so far. They did lose to Creighton in the Maui Invitational, but that is their only loss. They smacked Louisville. They beat a good San Diego State team. They came home and beat a good Oklahoma team on a neutral floor a few weeks ago. That's the positive. The other positive is they have 2 super dynamic guards in Ricky Council. Council's averaging just under 19 points per game. And Anthony Black is averaging about 12.5, 5 rebounds, 4 assists per game. The problem is the name that I just mentioned, Nick Smith Jr. So we already know that Trevin Brazile, the star forward, is out for the year for Arkansas. Where you get worried if you're an Arkansas fan, Nick Smith Jr., who many believe will be a top 5 pick next year, there is now concerns about his knee. Remember, He missed the early part of the season with a knee problem. He is now out indefinitely with another knee injury. If Nick Smith Jr. comes back and is at something close to 100%, I think Arkansas can win the national championship, as I just said last segment. Do worry a little bit about him. Do worry a little bit about them if he does not come back. And really quickly, let me say this. What's exciting about the SEC isn't just those three teams, Alabama, Arkansas, Tennessee at the top. It isn't the intrigue of Kentucky or even an Auburn, who, if you remember, won the SEC last year. It's that second tier of teams that right now is playing really well. And the cool part is they all have big games at home tonight. So we're going to learn a lot about them. If you remember last offseason, the SEC had 6 coaching changes. So of the 14 teams currently in the SEC, 6 of them had coaching turnover. Why do I bring it up? It was because I told you when the coaching changes happened, I said, I think Chris Jans at Mississippi State is going to be the best coaching hire of the group. Dennis Gates of Missouri is going to be the second best hire. And Matt McMahon, who's now at LSU from Murray State, was going to be the third best hire. Why do I bring it up? Mississippi State, currently 11-1 and ranked. Missouri, currently 11-1, not ranked, but will be if they beat Kentucky. LSU, currently 11-1. When AT tells you something, you listen. 33-3 from these three teams. I just think it adds a bunch of depth to the conference, okay? Overall, what stands out about these teams, they're all a little bit different. Mississippi State, Chris Jans, if you follow him, if you remember, he was at New Mexico State. They beat UConn in the opening round of the tournament, and they gave Arkansas fits in the second round. They are all about defense. I mentioned Tennessee's in the top 5 nationally in both scoring defense and field goal percentage defense. Did you know Mississippi State is as well? Mississippi State currently in the top 5 nationally in scoring defense and field goal percentage defense. I'll tell you this. I think it's a bad matchup for Alabama on the road to open SEC play. Look out for the upset potentially there. On the flip side, Missouri is a team that what was really interesting about them, they're almost the opposite. Dennis Gates has been known as a defensive coach, but they are putting the ball in the basket. Number 2 in the country. And this is crazy. Number 2 in the country in scoring, the Missouri Tigers. The Missouri Tigers are averaging just under 89 points per game. Demoy Hodge, who came with Dennis Gates, he was at Cleveland State. Demoy Hodge is averaging 17 points per game. Kobe Brown, 14.5 points per game for them. I'll tell you, like I said, if Kentucky does not come ready to play, Missouri beats them. And then finally, LSU and Matt McMahon. LSU, I think they just got a dude in Matt McMahon. And what I love about LSU, what I love about Matt McMahon, he brought a couple guys with him from Murray State to kind of establish the culture. KJ Williams, 19 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. Justice Hill, a guard who actually started his career at Arkansas. Really like this LSU team. Really intrigued to see them tonight against Arkansas at home. Finally, last little note that I think is worth keeping an eye on in college hoops right now. The Big East is not living up to expectations at all, okay? So the Big East is really interesting because obviously Villanova has run that conference. Creighton has been on the way up, and UConn has been great this year. But I don't think any of us expected the seasons that we've gotten out of any of them. UConn, 13-0, number 1 team in the country. In my opinion, number 2 in most polls. They're really good. Problem is Villanova, as I said, is 7-5. Creighton as well is 8-6. They went on a 6-game losing streak. Now, as I've said previously, remember, 1, they had a crazy travel schedule, okay? They went to Maui, played in the Maui Invitational, flew home, then immediately flew to Austin to play Texas before the Chris Beard incident, fly home, play 1 home game, then fly out to Vegas for 2 games in Vegas, then fly back home, go to Marquette in the Big East opener. And of those 6 losses, 5 of them came without their starting center, Ryan Kalkbrenner, who is an All-American type player. Ryan Kalkbrenner is now back. They are 2-0 with him, and I think Creighton is going to be okay. Villanova, we discussed. What's interesting is that next tier in the Big East. Providence, as I record, is playing Marquette. Providence is 10-3. As I record, Marquette is playing against Seton Hall. Marquette 9-4. And then, as I said, Xavier, a really interesting team at 10-3. All right, I think that's it for the college hoops portion of today's Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. Well, really not really, because the bottom line is we got more college hoops. So what I want to do now, I do want to take a quick break. And when I come back, Steve Rivera, really fun guest, Steve Rivera. He has covered the Arizona Wildcats forever. He has a new book out about Lute Olson. Okay, we talked a little bit to him prior to the Christmas holiday. Today was the first day that I could run it. But Steve Rivera, a great guest. If you are a college basketball junkie, he has some incredible insight into Arizona basketball, everything that goes into that program, and why I believe it's one of the most underrated programs in college hoops. Fun interview with Steve. You will enjoy it. I encourage you to stick around. If you love college basketball, if you're a junkie, Steve Rivera coming up next. Before we get out of here, I want to remind you, make sure that you're subscribed to the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure to subscribe. Also, make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. Make sure you're following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. Foaling Warehouse on Sunday, New Year's Day. Betfred is throwing a great party. I'm going to try to get there. We'll see if Southwest has other plans for me, but that is the plan. Foaling Warehouse. Click the link in the show description to sign up to go. And that's all for today's show. Well, all for my part of today's show. So with that said, shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Redick, you F-head. I'll be back on Friday. Full bowl, full college football preview. Now, let's get to Steve Rivera on his new book on Lute Olson. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Good to be back. I do want to switch gears, and I do want to talk about what has quickly become maybe our favorite topic here on the Aaron Torres Podcast and the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. That is our buddy, Coach Prime Deion Sanders. We have talked about this guy a ton, but this guy, to his credit, has come in and made Colorado football an absolute must discussion talking point, right? So we talked when he got the job. We talked when that first wave of guys decided to come with him. Dylan Edwards, the commit from Notre Dame. We talked a little bit about the coaching staff that came together. Defensive coordinator from Alabama, Sean Lewis, the former head coach from Kent State. The bottom line is, though, over the last week or so, we really haven't even hit on very much that Coach Prime has done as he continues to reshape this roster. And I'm not even necessarily talking about what he did on signing day. Signing day was one thing. But for those of you that were busy opening presents and drinking eggnog and watching the NFL and NBA on Christmas Day, Coach Prime had a Christmas weekend for the ages as he added several marquee players, including one of the top-rated high school players that he has signed so far. So let's get into it. But before we do, we haven't even talked about what happened on and around signing day, where you already know what happened. Coach Prime, that Louis luggage that he promised that he was bringing. I'm bringing my own luggage, and it's Louis. He started doing that right around signing day. We know about the fact that his son, Deion Sanders, the quarterback, 70% completion percentage, 30-plus touchdown passes, is coming with him to Colorado. That is obviously no surprise. But I will tell you this. The quarterback play in the Pac-12 next year might be through the roof. With the reigning Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams, potentially 5-star Dante Moore starting at UCLA. Of course, DJ Uiagalelei now headed to Oregon State. Bo Nix at Oregon. Michael Penix, who was in the Heisman conversation late, even though he didn't get to New York, is at Washington. So Deion Sanders is coming. Oh, by the way, we learned right around signing day, Travis Hunter, he said, once I get to 1K on YouTube, I am committing. And he does, in fact, commit to Colorado. So right away, you can already say if Coach Prime had done nothing else, if he had done absolutely nothing else, he just brought an NFL caliber quarterback to his roster, and he brought probably the best corner in college football with him as well. So that was what he did in the lead up to signing day. Also flips a 4-star wide receiver who had multiple SEC offers. Adam was the name. I'm blanking on the kid's name. Adam Hopkins, forgive me. Adam Hopkins. So right around signing day, Shador's coming with them. Travis Hunter's coming with him. Adam Hopkins, a 4-star receiver, is coming with him. And by the way, we didn't even talk about it, but you know the big news out of signing day with the news that Cormani McClain, the number 1 corner in America, was committed to Miami, is now seriously considering Colorado. So the bottom line is, if Coach Prime had done nothing else other than that, he would have already fulfilled his promise of upgrading the roster and the talent on the roster. But here's the thing. Over the holiday weekend, Coach Prime went crazy, okay? You were busy opening gifts. Coach Prime was opening up his own gift as one player after another committed to Colorado. It really is impressive because keep in mind, it was a dead period. You couldn't really talk to players. These players were committing to Coach Prime, over the holidays when it was otherwise quiet. Coach Prime went to work. So first of all, what did you miss over the holidays if you were busy and you weren't glued to your computer? Well, how about this? Dylan Edwards was the running back that committed a few weeks ago who had been committed to Notre Dame. That's the number one high school recruit in their class. Well, on Saturday, Christmas Day, maybe it was Christmas Eve day, forgive me, the number 2 high school player in their class, a wide receiver named Amarion Miller, committed to Coach Prime and Colorado, okay? Amarion Miller was committed to Nebraska under Scott Frost, reopens his recruitment. He is from Louisiana. Had offers from LSU, had offers from Arkansas, could have played in the SEC, could have played at Nebraska, chooses instead to follow Coach Prime to Colorado. And let me just tell you this, 4-star wide receiver, super explosive. How about this? Averaged 22 yards per catch during his high school career in Louisiana. Unbelievable talent. Will be another talented player that Coach Prime can get in space, get the ball to, and have him make plays. Beyond that, Coach Prime does what he did in the transfer portal. First of all, 2 marquee players outside of Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders announced that they will be following Coach Prime to Jackson State. The names you need to know there, and they're important. 1, Travis Brown, an All-American, an FCS All-American, and an HBCU All-American offensive lineman is following Coach Prime from Jackson State to Colorado. To me, this is very significant for one pretty straightforward reason. It's because, listen, I don't have any doubt that Coach Prime is going to be able to get the elite skill position guys, the corners, the safeties, the defensive backs, the wide receivers, the running backs. But to win at the highest level of college football, it is no secret. You need players on the interior. You need players on the offensive line. You need players on the defensive line. This guy was an FCS All-American. It's obviously going to be a step up, but I guarantee you, he is a guy that's probably better than most of the guys that Colorado had last year. And on top of that, he wasn't the only former Jackson State player, again, along with Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter to come, as additionally, Cameron Silman Craig, another HBCU All-American. He is a cornerback, is following Coach Prime. So those are the 4 marquee Jackson State players that you need to know. Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, Travis Brown, the interior offensive lineman, Cameron Silman Craig, the cornerback. This kid finished with 61 total tackles, second at Jackson State, 2 interceptions, pass breakup. And so when I look at the team that Coach Prime is putting together, they're going to be talented on the outside. They are going to be talented at cornerback. And you're already talking about an elite secondary that is starting to come together for Coach Prime in Colorado. The thing was, though, despite signing several marquee high school players over the weekend, or getting commitments from them anyway, on top of getting a couple commitments from his Jackson State players, Coach Prime was not done. Here is what he also did in the transfer portal outside of the 2 kids from Jackson State that are following him. 1, name you need to know. This kid is a super high-profile wide receiver. Kid named Jimmy Horn, played last year at South Florida, was an all-AAC performer at South Florida. He hit the portal. He was as coveted as any wide receiver in the portal. He was a kid that had offers from Texas A&M, from Penn State, from Georgia, from Tennessee. If you're good enough to get offers from Georgia and Tennessee, that goes without saying. You can play anywhere in college football. This kid chooses Coach Prime, just another player get the ball to in space, along with Dylan Edwards, 4-star running back that was committed to Notre Dame, along with Amarion Miller, who we just discussed, along with Adam Hopkins, along with Travis Hunter, who's probably going to get some touches on offense. Jimmy Horn, all AAC performer. And then this is a big one too. Arkansas State tight end Sidhu Traore, a kid who was all first-team Sun Belt at Arkansas State this year, 50 catches, over 10 yards per catch, 4 touchdown passes, another weapon for this offense. So I could go on and on and on and on and on. But the bottom line is, when I see all of this activity in the portal, in recruiting, this says two things to me. One, this is why you hire Coach Prime, okay? As we record here on December 26th, the day after Christmas, here is what Colorado has already done in 3 weeks under Coach Prime. And keep in mind this as well. 2 of those weeks, he was back at Jackson preparing for the Celebration Bowl. So he's basically been full-time in Colorado 1 week. Here's what they've done. They already have the number 3 transfer portal class in college football, according to 24/7 Sports, okay? Now, they've taken a few more guys than some of these other schools, but they are ahead of the schools that we all know recruit the portal well. LSU, USC, etc. The only schools right now that are ahead of them is Michigan, which I believe have taken 6 commitments from the portal. Oklahoma has been very active in the portal for obvious reasons. And then it's Colorado. Colorado's ahead of Texas. Colorado's ahead of, all of these schools that recruit the portal. Colorado's ahead of them. On top of that, and I think this is equally important, I was blown away by this. So when Amarion Miller committed, he is the second highest recruit in this class, okay? Second highest recruit in this class behind Dylan Edwards, the player who I mentioned a minute ago had been committed to Notre Dame, now is committed to Colorado. For fun, I went back and looked it up. How about this? He is the second highest rated player in this class. He is the third highest rated player that Colorado has signed since 2017. So 2018, 2019, 21, 22, 23. In the last 5 recruiting classes. In the last, actually 6. 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. In the last 6 recruiting classes, 5 prior to Coach Prime, this one with Coach Prime, they have signed 1 player, the caliber of the top 2 players that they've signed, and really the top 3 players that they've signed, if you include Adam Hopkins, 3 4-stars. They hadn't even signed a 4-star since the class of 2020, none in the last 2. They have already signed 3, and I don't believe they're done. And with the portal, they are infusing talent. And so when I look at what is going on right now at Colorado, 2 things stand out. 1, this is why you hire Coach Prime. Listen, I have been on this show. I've been on this YouTube channel. You can go back to September when I was saying that Coach Prime should be a candidate for every job that opens. And I said, I think Auburn, that this should be their number 1 call. Now, I like what Auburn got with Hugh Freeze. So this isn't a criticism of Auburn or Hugh Freeze. But what Coach Prime brings is several different things. 1, he's a great coach. We all know 12-0 in the regular season this year, 11-1 in the regular season last year. And so you look at the coaching aspect of it, but you look at the excitement that he brings to your program. I don't think there's a program with more buzz right now anywhere in college football than Colorado Coach Prime Deion Sanders. He brings excitement. He's going to bring talent to your roster. And just think about how we perceived Colorado prior to Deion Sanders, Coach Prime's arrival, as opposed to right now. I don't think any of us had a perception of Colorado. They were just a dead program that nobody talked about. Now, you guys and girls and myself, I include myself, you can't get enough of Coach Prime. You want to know every move he makes. What's he doing? What's this in the portal? Who's this recruit? You're looking at film. You're watching videos like this. This guy creates so much excitement for his program. Secondly, what I would say, yes, there is a lot of work to be done. Yes, ultimately, Coach Prime, if he wants to build a title contender, probably at Colorado, maybe somewhere else. If he wants to build a title contender, it can't just be about corners and safeties and wide receivers. You got to get some big boys on the inside. As I said, it's almost a little bit like USC last year. We knew Lincoln Riley can recruit quarterbacks and wide receivers and skill position guys. Lincoln Riley is ultimately going to win a national championship or not at USC based on what he can do on the interior, along the offensive line, the defensive line, at linebacker. And so that's still going to be ultimately Coach Prime's edict as well. Can he get those big boys up front that are playmakers? As ironically, I actually saw Coach Prime put out a tweet basically saying, I need me some hungry D tackles. Who wants to come eat? We coming, Coach Prime out, all that good stuff. So I think even he knows, I think we all know, to ultimately catch the best programs in this sport, and you know who they are, you're going to have to get some of those big boys up front. But I am blown away by the talent that he has already brought in. If he signs nobody else, and we know he's going to sign more players, I already think their skill position talent is probably on par with just about anybody in the Pac-12. Maybe USC's a step above, but you can't tell me that UCLA has better skill position talent than a bunch of 4 stars, a bunch of highly rated recruits. Can't tell me Oregon does. Can't tell me Arizona State does. Arizona does. Arizona's got some pretty good players, actually. So you look at the talent that is around him, and you look at the fact that he's not done. Listen, Cormani McClain's the big name. Unbelievable that he can even get this kid to reconsider going to Miami after he's been committed for about 2.5 months, been recruited by that staff for a year. But you look at what he has already done. You look at the fact that here's the other thing that you have to consider. There is going to be another wave of transfers. We saw on Tuesday morning, Sam Hartman, the quarterback at Wake Forest, entered the portal after his bowl game. Now, Sam Hartman's not coming to Colorado. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is we still got a few weeks left in this portal cycle, and I don't think we're done seeing marquee names hop in, and I don't think we're done seeing marquee names commit to Coach Prime and Deion Sanders. So credit Coach Prime, credit Deion Sanders. He continues to rebuild this roster, and I'm just telling you, he likes to say it. I'll say it for him. He says, we coming. Colorado is coming, and it is only going to get better from here. If you enjoyed this video, do me a quick favor, subscribe to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. Click the little, I believe it's a black or a white button, whatever, below, and make sure you're following. Also, full episodes of the Aaron Torres Podcast available wherever you download podcasts.